This is Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate, the podcast where we cover home buying, home selling, home improvement tips and ideas, market trends and developments, and investing in real estate. If you own real estate in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area, or want to own real estate here, then you're in the right place. Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate is hosted by Blake Watson, a real estate agent and investor in Tennessee and Georgia, brokered by eXp Realty, LLC.
Welcome to Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate. I'm Blake Watson, a licensed agent in Tennessee and Georgia and brokered by eXp Realty, LLC. Today, my guest is Don Oakes, branch manager at Highlands Residential Mortgage here in Chattanooga. Welcome, Don.
Good to be here, Frank.
It's good to have you.
Okay.
Don, you've been a mortgage broker for
a long time.
I mean, we've known each other
Yes.
for decades.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah.
You've done several home loans for me over the years. So you and I have been connected closely for many years.
And we haven't done one recently, Blake, so we need to fix that.
Well, you refinanced me a few years ago, and
That's not soon enough. Baby needs a new pair of shoes, Blake.
Right.
We need to take care of
So
that.
we need to do another loan. I'll be talking to you about that soon enough, I'm sure. So what we wanted to talk about today, you have this, I don't know if is it a new product?
Fairly new, just a couple of months old, yeah.
Highlands Community Lending Program. Community lending program. Tell me about what a community lending program is.
Yeah, I'm going to go into a long spiel, so just, throw something at me if I'm going too long here. A recognition from, this is actually a bigger bank that's kind of funding this, but certainly they've partnered with mortgage companies, that there are some underserved areas. And you take a big city or even a mid-sized city like Chattanooga, there's just are vast underserved areas. And what I mean by that is, if you go back and look at every 0.25% increase in interest rate drives thousands and thousands of people across the country out of the ability to buy a house.
Okay.
Because of that increases the payment, further stresses their debt load that they would have. And there's certainly, every lender has these, what we call ratios. So if somebody has to fit inside those, they don't want to overload somebody with too much debt, especially on a mortgage, that they eventually can't afford. So there's a limit as to what you can do. So every 0.25%, and I tried to find that number before I came here, Blake, and I couldn't, but it's thousands of people across the country that it pushes out of being able to buy a home because they just can't afford it. You look at prices of homes, et cetera, et cetera. So we've had over the last year lots and lots of 0.25% increases in the rate. We're a full 3%, 3.5% above where we were a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. So this program recognizes that there are underserved areas. There's areas in cities like Chattanooga that the average sale price is below median sales price, and home ownership levels in those areas are much below the national average. So a solution to that is a lower than normal market, as we say, interest rate. So how do you do that? You partner with a bigger bank that can afford to do this, that's into community lending, to try to kind of level the playing field. So what the community lending program does is offer a below market interest rate. There are no other limitations. It has to be in these certain areas of town. And it's kind of a convoluted map if you look at it. But and I hate to mention zip codes because it's more complicated than that.
Right.
But if you took, I would say the square footage or the area is about 35 to 40% of all of Chattanooga qualifies for this program. And your interest rate can be up to 1.5%, 1.5% below market. So a rate we were quoting a couple of weeks ago as a comparison was 6.375%, as opposed to that same person, if they weren't in the community lending program, might be at 7.5%, 7 5/8. So
wow, what a difference.
That difference can be as little as 0.5%, but it's still better, up to 1.5% difference in rate. So that it does a little bit towards getting somebody into that house that they maybe otherwise couldn't afford. You don't have to be a first-time buyer. I don't know if I said that. And there's no income limitation. It's like other programs. You can be making $500,000 a year and still qualify for community lending if it's the houses in these areas that are not being served adequately.
Yeah.
So,
it's pretty extraordinary. I mean, so many special interest programs and down payment assistance and things like that do have income limitations.
Right.
But this is extraordinary because it's geographic focused to be able to help these underserved neighborhoods, really.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's the way to put it.
It's called communities, but it's neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of them. This map, when you study it, and I'm going to post it on my website, realestatebyblake.com. I don't know if it's readily available. Any other source that you know of?
No, we're relying on Blake Watson to post this. So that's a good idea.
That's a great idea. All right, I'm going to have that map available on my website. But it's a remarkably large footprint in Chattanooga.
Yeah.
Enough that you can look on this map and say, okay, I know some people that live over this way, or I might be interested in moving. And maybe, like we were talking about the Brainerd area, you and I were earlier. Yeah. And it's interesting how the map is drawn. If you're in Brainerd, it needs to be north of Brainerd Road.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So between Brainerd Road and the Interstate 24, then you're not in this community zone.
Correct.
But if you go on the other side of Brainerd Road, on the north side of Brainerd Road, going up towards the airport, towards Highway 58,
Shallowford Road,
yeah,
all
that.
Exactly. All that works.
All of that works. Yeah. And you can qualify for this. And it goes, and we looked, Lake Hills, I think, is in there.
Yeah, Highway 58.
Keeps on going on up the highway there.
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing.
And even the riverfront. And we touched on that a second ago, too. So you think of all the, I don't know if this is exactly what they had in mind when they created this program, but all of that new development that's on the riverfront, literally on the riverfront, there off Riverfront Parkway.
That's right.
Works.
Yeah. Anything that's kind of downstream of Highway 27, roughly.
Yeah. Downstream is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So I wish I'd thought of that. So
that's the way I think of the river. It's what's upstream, what's downstream.
Yeah.
So if it's downstream of Highway 27, you're pretty much in this zone. On the this will be on the south side of the river.
Yeah. And keep in mind too, if you're looking or even thinking of looking at a house in the city limits of Chattanooga, it's worth checking into. So look at Blake's map. Give us a call at Highlands. We'll just type in the address and we can tell you, yes, it works. None of East Ridge works. None of the city of Red Bank works. Just think, let's start with city of Chattanooga and then look at those areas inside city of Chattanooga.
That's great. Yes. Okay. Inside the city limits. That's where we're going to start.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. And again, no income limit. There are it looks like some credit score limits. They're not extraordinarily difficult, or maybe they're not limits. I don't know.
There are not. The example that I sent is it's a 680 credit score as an example of a slightly below average score. If you looked across the country, an average score is around 740 for people to get in a home. At the 680 credit score, certainly the program works. It'll work all the way down to a 620 credit score.
Gotcha.
So the example here at 680 was, I think it was about 1.5% again, difference. If you had a 680 score and didn't do community lending versus having a 680 score and you did do community lending, that's the difference. So
what would be some of the comparisons that you would have with a regular home loan?
Yeah, so there's a conforming loan limit through Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. You've heard those terms before, and it's right at $755,000 now. So you could buy $1 million house if you put $250,000 down and do a $750,000 mortgage. That conforms to their limit, so you're going to get all the benefits of that. Automated underwriting, so I'm going to tell you right away that the loan's approved.
Okay.
A really good interest rate that, because your loan conforms to those certain standards.
Oh, right, as opposed to a non-conforming.
So this is designed to be a conforming loan. So there is a down payment required, but as little as 3% for a first-time home buyer. So you're buying trying to do the math in my head, Blake. You're doing, doing a $300,000 house, $9,000 would be the down payment required.
Right.
You can negotiate for the seller to pay those closing costs. So then you're into the house for just $9,000 in that case on a $300,000 house. $200,000 house, it's $6,000.
Right.
To get into the house. So on a conforming loan, again, that $755,000, you could do a $755,000 mortgage in this community lending program. If you found a house with a reduced rate.
Yeah, with the reduced rate.
So there's no catches there. There's no income limit. As I said, you can make $500,000 a year and qualify for this program if the house is in the community lending area. So that's the basic difference of other standards that are going to be met. They want a decent credit score, 680 ideal, better ideal, not necessary. 620 is a minimum. And a lot of times if somebody comes in and they have a score that's slightly below 620, Typically, we can say, okay, here's what you need to, here's a trick you can do. Pay down this credit card. Here's an old medical collection. See if you can get that taken off your credit. You've paid it, you made arrangements to pay it, or you've settled for 50% of, that's a $300 medical collection. I bet if you call them and offer them $150 or $100, they'll take it and delete it from your credit report, and your score goes up immediately. So we can do all those tricks and typically get somebody's credit fixed, in 2 or 3 months, and they're on their way. But we still have to have an appraisal and all that kind of standard stuff for a conforming loan. And there is, a debt ratio that we got to follow. You don't want somebody to get over their heads on a payment, but the total debt shouldn't exceed 50%. So it's pretty generous.
Yeah,
really.
that is.
So if you're making $5,000 a month for the family, whatever the case may be, they don't want your total new house payment and any existing installment debt or credit card minimum payment debt to exceed $2,500 a month.
It works.
That's as easy. I'm just doing easy math again.
Right. Let's also talk about what might be, I'm not going to say it's the opposite, but it is very different than the community lending. And yet it's also intended to help a geographic area. And that's the USDA loan program. Can we talk about USDA for a moment?
USDA, rural development. It goes by that same, administered by the Department of Agriculture. Go figure. So
trying to help the farmers in America.
Trying to help the farmers in America for a very loosely defined rural area. That's what they have determined to be a rural area. So if you're thinking about Hamilton County, think of far northern, and I would say far northern, Soddy Daisy works, Sail Creek works, and think of far eastern, Apison works for this. So it's kind of like you draw a smaller semicircle in Hamilton County, works for rural development. And if you think of North Georgia, the southern part, and this is just an overgeneralization, Blake, the southern part of Walker, Dade, and Catoosa work for rural development for that. Just if you look in city limits of Ringgold, that doesn't work. City limits of Rossville, that doesn't work. But think of, the southern part of those 3 counties work. Rural development is 100% loan, so it's designed to be a zero down payment. You can structure it for your seller to pay your closing costs for you, so you literally can get into that house for zero. It's a competitive interest rate, not as good as community lending, but it's going to be a competitive interest rate. Right now, we'd probably be right around 7%, 6.75% or 7% on that. There is an income limitation, but it's, again, very generous. A family of 2, it's $99,000 a year. So you get on up to a family of 4, and it greatly goes up from there for an income limitation on that. Other than that, there's no catch to that.
That's a great program, too.
It's a great program.
So both of these programs that we've talked about, there's the Highlands Community Lending Program, which is really something relatively new that we're excited to share today. USDA and the Rural Development Programs have been around a while. It's been around a long time and well used, but also interesting, and they're both geographically limited. Let's go back to the Brainerd thing, because that Brainerd Road, it's so amazing that you could be on one side of Brainerd Road, that property qualifies. The other side of Brainerd Road, it does not qualify. If I'm looking in that neighborhood, I need to talk to you first.
Yeah.
Or at least look at my map on realestatebyblake.com and say, okay, this works or this doesn't work.
That famous site.
But that famous site. But somebody should call Don. Yeah. They should call you, and you can look at the address. You can discuss it with them. You can give them a map and say, hey, go shopping in this area.
And not to confuse everybody, which is my goal usually, but let's say it's that other side of Brainerd Road that you were just talking about. Anywhere in the state of Tennessee, you can use Tennessee housing as for a first-time buyer. So that's, I don't want to go into those details to confuse everybody. So there's a program almost literally for every part of Tennessee if you go that way, but especially community lending. What is unique about it, as you mentioned, no income cap to that, and no price cap.
No price cap, no income cap.
Right.
And a reduced interest rate.
The whole idea is, again, how can we help people get into a house that otherwise might not qualify for a house? That's the whole goal.
Okay.
We're not going to put an income cap on it, and we're not going to put a price cap on it. So like a Tennessee housing is $400,000 price cap right now. So that doesn't have that on a community lending.
Yeah. But I guess the real lesson, the real takeaway here from today's podcast is if someone calls you, Don, then whatever property they're looking at buying, you're going to fit them with the right program and the best option, or at least you're going to share with them, here's some different ways you could get this done.
We're going to try to do that.
Exactly. I mean, if it falls in one of these geographic areas, you would be able to offer that.
Yeah.
And if, I'm looking at a house that doesn't happen to be in one of those geographic areas, well, you've still got the Tennessee program, the state programs, and you've still got just any other variety of programs available. FHA, and VA, those sorts of things too.
And one of the things about community lending that we touched on a minute ago was it is a conforming loan. So yes, you could just put 3% down or 5% down payment. You're going to have the fee called mortgage insurance. But since this is a conforming loan, that mortgage insurance is cancelable. So you're still in this because you've gotten a better than normal rate. Let's say you're still in that house 3 years from now, 4 years from now. You're going to be able to cancel that mortgage insurance more than likely. You've paid your payments on time, and you've accumulated, probably because of the increased value of the home, and you've paid down the mortgage a little bit, you've accumulated 20 to 22% equity in that house. So that house that you paid $300 for, let's take 3 years from now, in theory might be worth $330, $340 or something like that. You've accumulated value there. So you've put a little bit of money down. So let's look at getting that mortgage insurance canceled. Nobody's going to call you. Nobody's going to send you a letter. You got to keep track of that yourself.
Gotcha.
But a minimum of 2 years.
Minimum of 2 years.
Yeah.
And then I guess you get it reappraised at that point? Or
possibly. Or it could be whomever this is servicing the loan. That's not unique to Highlands. Whoever's servicing the loan. I don't know why this is such a big kept secret. Whoever's servicing that loan will look at your history, your payment history, and probably do an automated search for values, whatever that search engine might be that they're using. If it says that the value definitely is there, they're probably not even going to require an appraisal.
How about that?
If it's on the line, they probably are. We're not sure if that value is there or not. They're probably going to require appraisal.
But if it's very evident.
And so it's not going to be a full-blown appraisal like we have to order when you're buying the house. But let's say it's $300, So you just do the math. Okay, if I pay for that, I'm pretty sure the value's there, but I'm paying $80 a month for whatever. For mortgage insurance, I can break even in 3 months or 4 months or something like that. Yeah, let's go for it. Let's get an appraisal done. So
great strategy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Don. How can someone get in touch with you and ask you what address works for what?
Other than through Blake Watson and his podcast.
You can certainly do that.
Okay. Highlands Mortgage, phone number 624-0448 or highlandsmortgage.com, either one. And then it'll ask what loan officer, and you enter in your favorite person that that's in the mortgage business, and that's Don Oakes.
Don Oakes.
And it'll come to me. Yeah.
Very good. Well, Don, thank you so much for being on the show today, and thank you for all this great information, and I'm excited to hear some good success stories about this.
Yes.
If you don't happen to remember to call Don, you can always call me, and I'll get you in touch with him. It's Blake Watson. I'm an agent with eXp Realty, LLC, and my mobile phone is 423-315-1815, and my brokerage office phone is 888-519-5113, extension 1241. You can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn as Blake Watson and on Instagram as Rock and Roll Blake. My website is realestatebyblake.com. That's where I'm going to have that map also posted. Please subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss an episode. And I'll look forward to talking with you next week on Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate.